Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jen, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is my childhood tennis partner, actually, Dr. Austin Chiang. Hi, Austin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm so happy to have reconnected with Austin over social media since our quote unquote graceful team days. Yes, that's what we called ourselves when we played on the tennis court. Uh, our tennis career didn't go very far, unfortunately. But as you can see, Dr. Chiang has since successfully become a chief medical social media officer at Jefferson Health in Philadelphia and an interventional bariatric endoscopy expert with degrees from Columbia and Harvard. That was very long for me to say. I had to ask Austin earlier, how do you pronounce bariatric? So I'm really excited to talk to Austin today and have him share with us his story on what identity means for him, being one of the pioneers of the medical influencer role, to an in-depth conversation about how to use social media to advocate and push for awareness in your expertise area and support other causes. So without further ado, Austin, I pass the mic to you.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, it's been such a long time since our graceful team days and our tennis classes. And so much has happened, and that's like what life is all about is just kind of adapting to your current situation. And that's how I've really lived my life is just gone with the flow. And it's been great because it's opened up a lot of opportunities. And as you alluded to, part of my career has really been about, my clinical focus and my day job as a doctor, taking care of patients in the hospital, doing the usual doctor things that people usually imagine me doing. And then there's this whole other aspect of being on social media and putting myself out there and using the platforms to convey, accurate health messaging and helping other doctors do the same thing too. That's been a true passion of mine is how can we, try to use these platforms to reach more people and impact public health. And it's become a much more relevant topic over the past, year or two with the pandemic, because now we're facing so much misinformation online. And I think it's actually catalyzed this movement toward, making sure that there are more health professionals online and that we are using social media in a way to connect with people and to, be, hopefully impacting public health in a positive way.
Thank you for that lovely intro there about what you do. But before we continue to dive deeper into medicine and social media, I did want to ask you about your transition from the US to Taiwan to graduate from high school here. And then you went back to the US for college. And I recall in our conversations before, you had mentioned that your transition from the US to Taiwan wasn't as difficult as your transition from Taiwan back to the US for college. Could you share with us a little bit about that experience during that time for you?
Well, no, yeah, it was definitely a bigger transition, especially I'd gone to college at Duke in North Carolina, never lived on the East Coast or the South for that matter. And was I think that year the only person from, our high school who went there. So really had to build, my network from the ground up. And yeah, it was different because I felt we were so isolated in Taiwan. Communication was different than it is now. There's not a ton of social media. We don't have as much shared cultural experiences with a lot of like, you know, Netflix and YouTube and things like that. So, I think there was even a greater adjustment to and catching up to do after I, moved to the U.S. And it was also like kind of again trying to find myself in this world of okay, where do I consider home and you know there's so much uncertainty at that age too, like what's my future going to look like, where am I going to end up. So I don't know. I think I found it to be much more of a struggle. And there were times where I thought that, okay, because I had lived in this bubble in Taiwan, in this like American school bubble, that I regretted not having made more connections outside of that bubble and felt like in some ways I didn't live a true Taiwanese experience because of that. Um, and yeah, but I think, everything happens for a reason, and that's only made me reflect more and be more, I think, aware of my situation.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you on that. I think most of us who went through that school probably only know our bubble and don't really know Taiwan at all. I would say that I only got to know Taiwan after I graduated from college and moved back and really got to explore our backyard.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, totally.
Yeah. But would you say that when you went to Duke, that like basically what you're illustrating earlier is identity,
Mhm.
right? Like figuring out your identity. So I guess what at what point did you recognize that you were struggling between two worlds and really trying to figure out where you fit in? And like you said earlier, what did you want to do with your future? Did you always know you wanted to go to med school? And I do recall you were a great violinist. We played tennis together, obviously, and you really excelled in school. So, was medical school always in the picture for you in terms of once you got to Duke, you're like, I'm going to do pre med and this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I try to keep an open mind, and I had kind of yeah, it's been in the back of my mind that I wanted to go this path, but I really walked into college being like, okay, I want to really give everything a chance, and I tried to take classes from all different, fields, and part of it was also to just make sure that I had a complete college experience, and so I did feel like, okay, after having taken all these different classes and gotten a taste of a little, a bit of, economics and political science and all that stuff, that, okay, I think my personality and my interests really best suit medicine. And so that's how I decided, finally, it's not like I had a one track kind of set plan going into college. Um, and I'm glad I did that. And it was kind of, and I think maybe we might get into this a little bit more, but my whole medical journey, my professional medical journey has unfolded kind of in a very gradual way, in terms of finding myself in the current specialty that I'm in. That was not apparent from the get-go.
Wow.
Yeah, because I have some family members who are in medicine, and that's what I was exposed to. I have a cousin who is a plastic surgeon, and another one who's an ophthalmologist, an eye doctor. But that was all I knew about medicine going into it. And then what I realized was, okay, most of medicine is nothing like that, because it's so diverse that again, when I went to med school, I also kept an open mind. You're almost forced to go through everything to kind of get a sampling of everything as you rotate through all the different rotations. And from there, because of the way medicine is now, it's so super specialized now that you first get into the first step, and then you become more specialized over time. And it's so specialized now that there's just so many different, like, hundreds of pathways you can take. And so my area, I mean, I went to med school for 4 years, then it was internal medicine residency for 3 years. Then after that, I did another 3-year fellowship, and then I did a 1-year fellowship after that. And so that's how, like, narrow it becomes. And so the pool of applicants at each step obviously gets smaller and smaller, and the number of spots that are available to match into are also smaller. And so yeah, it's become, it kind of has, I've had to make decisions along the way to get to where I
It sounds so competitive.
am. It is in some ways, and it's stressful, and it's long and costly. Because in total, after high school, it was a 15-year journey. My final year of training ended in 2018.
That's
Um,
only just a
yeah,
few years ago.
just a few years ago. Yeah. And so when I graduated from med school was 10 years ago. But then when that was after med school graduation was another 7 years of training. And so it's a long, costly process because every step of the way, it's just like more exams and more interviews and, evaluations. So, uh, I mean, it's a very fulfilling experience, though.
Wait, I just have to ask. Was there at one point where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I just want to quit. Like why am I spending 15 years of my like youth on
I
this?
think everyone in my field has had at least one fleeting thought of that, especially in really difficult moments. Especially in those moments where it's in the middle of the night, you're dealing with something really complicated and someone's life is on the line, and you're kind of in some ways I thrive on that because I feel like, oh, this is my opportunity to like use my skills. But on the other hand, it's like, wow, this is a lot of stress and 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 you feel like you don't, you're obviously wanting to save a life, and it can be kind of extreme like that. So I mean, in some ways, I think what's great about medicine is that it's not only, doesn't look one certain way anymore. There's so many ways you can do things in medicine nowadays. And some of it is like advancing the technology. Some of it is like being involved in public health or global health. Some of it is kind of health management or public policy. And, there's just so many ways to go about this, where it's
So
still sort of,
medicine has evolved.
oh, absolutely. And it's like, everyone is still serving that greater purpose of, of preserving public health and helping our communities, but just in different ways. So if you're unhappy in one situation, you have options. So I don't think anyone now um, feels compelled that they have to like be pigeonholed into like one way of doing things for the rest of their lives.
Wow, that's great to hear for the younger generation who want
Yeah,
to get into medicine
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
to
And
have those options.
yeah, exactly. And I think our generation tends to be, more adventurous and wanting to, you know, um, be creative in how they pursue their careers, and now's the time to do that.
Wow, that's so great. What kind of advice would you give to, kids who want to go into med school or people who are currently still finishing up their
Yeah.
degree, I guess, to officially be able to practice?
You know, the way I've approached it, and I've kind of touched on this, is really just to keep an open mind because you just never know what opportunities will come about, and if you have a true interest in something that might seem a little unconventional or offbeat, go with it. Part of the reason why it's unconventional or offbeat, or if you have people, kind of dissuading you from doing something, is probably because it hasn't been done and it's an opportunity for you. And social media is like the example, for me, where I had a lot of, naysayers at the beginning and people feeling like it was a, waste of time. And fast forward several years, and now it's like such a important topic. And I've seen my own field, like within gastroenterology, where I was one of the very first people, like on Twitter, even when I first started, that was my platform of choice when I started, to going from like 5 people on there to now hundreds of gastroenterologists on Twitter, and then on other platforms too. And now everyone recognizes how important it can be and how it can be used as a tool. And I think it's only the beginning. I'm a little jaded already because I've been doing this for a couple of years, but I think that this is only the beginning of fully embracing social media as a part of you know, communicating about health and using it to the benefit of our field.
So I will come back to social media and medicine, but I just wanted to congratulate you for being nominated for the GLAD LGBTQ TikTok Advocate of the Year recently. I want to talk a little bit more about how has it felt to be able to advocate and support this community through the platform. Like you said earlier, you've been online for a few years now, and you've seen how it has grown and how you can advocate for different things, including LGBTQ and medicine. So how I guess we can go into how social media is in a positive way. I mean, we can also talk about all the negatives, but in a positive way, allows for more depth of reach and awareness.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been such a great tool to build communities and to highlight, certain important social justice issues, and I'm very happy to lend my voice, to this cause, and it's allowed me to, just be. I think one important thing about, kind of combating, homophobia and racism and a lot of the other social justice issues that I think have garnered a lot of attention over the past year or so is visibility and showing that we have people from all walks of life who fall into these groups and who are contributing positively to society and just and I think that uh, yeah, the more we all speak out about these things um, and just raise awareness, I think the better. And I've been very grateful for these experiences because I've been able to collaborate with amazing organizations and to like for instance, the Trevor Project is an organization that provides basically resources for youth who are struggling with you know, um, who in the LGBTQ youth who are really struggling out there, and I think helping, keep them safe. And I think that that's a really important subject because, you know, there are a lot of people out there struggling, and we want to make sure that they can have those resources available to them.
That's great. I think that's the beauty of social media these days, in a positive way, allowing more organizations and individuals who need a platform to be able to voice themselves. And obviously, with the recent Olympics and watching these different athletes come out and advocate and talk about mental health is another example. So, going back to when you said you've been on social media for a few years now, what made you decide at that point? I guess you were still in residency maybe when you were doing this, but what made you decide to be like, oh, I'm just going to start talking about my field on social media? And I guess you said originally you started off with Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up in the social media generation, right? Facebook came out my freshman year in college, so I was sort of the target demographic back then, and I'd always been a fan of social media even before Facebook, and so I think I just loved how it was a way to stay connected with people and connect with new friends and ultimately, I didn't really see it being used as a professional tool until um, about 2013, 2014. And it happened to coincide when I was with me trying to understand how patients were getting their medical information. Because what I was seeing from my end were patients coming into the hospital sometimes because of things that they heard about on the news or through the media. And so I started questioning, okay, who is vetting the medical news out there that's showing up on your evening news? Who gets to decide what's being put up there and what's important and how this information gets out? So I spent some time at ABC News and a part of kind of their behind the scenes team, kind of vetting the medical news to understand, how medical journal articles that are being published and the latest research is actually picked up by the media and evaluated before getting put on air. And at the time, they happened to be using Twitter to host weekly chats about various health topics. And there were a lot of important people and important organizations participating in these chats. And I thought, okay, there's something here, and I should try this myself, especially as somebody who's been on social media just for fun. And I started out with Twitter. And at the time, no one in my field understood it. and I'll say that there are other doctors in other fields who are already kind of pioneering the area. But in my field, it was slow to adopt. Yeah.
Would you say that because your field is oh, not as sexy? Can I use that term?
Yeah. I don't
In
know.
terms of being on social media, right? I think
Yeah.
dermatologists were on social media, right? The pimple
Yeah.
popper, like just I think
Yeah.
for medical early on for social media, definitely there was a presence, but it's for more, like dermatology or
Yeah.
yeah, other
Yeah, I get
fields.
where you're coming from. I mean, I think that on certain platforms like Instagram, definitely like the visual fields of like dermatology or, plastic surgery come to mind. But, from an academic discussion point of view, there were actually other fields like um, kidney doctors and cardiologists talking about their areas on Twitter, and it just wasn't quite as developed, in my area. And so it wasn't so much of for that reason as much as there just wasn't somebody out there, familiar with it.
Sorry, I
And
didn't mean to say your field was not sexy if I offended anybody in your field.
no, we get it, you know. And so I thought that, you know, um, that Twitter was where I started out, and actually ran into a lot of red tape originally because back then, and even now, a lot of health organizations and institutions kind of don't see social media as, a positive thing. They see it as a liability. And so it took a little bit of convincing, and I started doing research in social media kind of academically. And I started helping our professional societies out with social media efforts. And that's sort of how my presence professionally became more known in among my colleagues.
You made it sexy. There you go. That's you.
Oh, well, maybe. I mean, I can only hope so. That's part of the goal here. Yeah, because I think more and more of us started getting online, and then then migrated onto other platforms like Instagram and YouTube and TikTok ultimately. And yeah, part of the goal was to put out accurate health information, foster, productive conversations among colleagues, but also to, improve the perception of our field because there's a lot of mistrust in health professionals nowadays, and just to show that, hey, we're not robotic and we're not unapproachable or intimidating. Like we're just like everyone else. We have the same questions and interests and struggles, and we're fun people, and I think that's really important, to help build that connection with patients. Um,
So you had mentioned integrating academic with social media, and just I guess I'm a naive, so I don't really understand that. And if you could kind of educate us a little bit, what does that mean when you say using academic and social media versus just it's Dr. Austin Chang talking about bariatric
yeah,
endoscopy on social media, and I was like, I have to look at how I pronounce this again. But on social media, uh, the academic element
yeah,
sounded like it's quite important. So, because I guess, like, as just a
yeah,
viewer, I wouldn't know the difference. I'd be like, oh, right, this doctor's just talking about these different things.
sure. Yeah, I mean, part of that was a very strategic move to make sure that I came at it from an academic approach. And what that means is that, in order for me to sort of convince my colleagues and others that this is important for our field, I treat it as like a research subject, just like anything else that we study in medicine. Other people are studying new treatments or like, things like that. Part of me was trying to study, the conversations that we're having about my field online, and how we should approach it, and try to, you know, understand it better and convince people that yes, this is important. So actually, yeah, over the years and some of the more recent work I've done in that area is looking at, for instance, the most popular YouTube videos about certain topics and whether or not they're accurate videos or are they garbage. And shockingly or not shockingly, a lot of it is not good, information out there. And that only goes to support the fact that we need more people out there talking about what we do so that other people aren't out there putting out falsehoods and misleading the public. And that's kind of what the whole situation is right now with the pandemic. Is there's been so much misinformation that a lot of people have been convinced to do otherwise, convinced to do things that are not evidence based, that are not kind of consistent with what we recommend, uh, from a public health perspective.
Wow, that was a lot. I feel like I need to process this a little bit because now I feel like every time I'm looking on social media, I'm probably not getting accurate information. And it's like, does my brain actually sit there and try to filter and understand, is this actually professionally or academically proven? Or, is this just some
Yeah,
conspiracy theory, or someone, is just trying to make a buck out of promoting something?
yeah.
So it is important to understand as a viewer too what information you're absorbing, right?
Well,
So
and I'm loving that you're having that revelation because that's totally what we're trying to do, is trying to say, hey, just it's not even listen to what I'm saying, but just think twice about what you're seeing online. And it's not, part of it is, um, comes not only from social media, but just everything that we're exposed to begin with. Like products that we buy at the store often are marketed in certain ways that are a little bit misleading. They say doctor recommended and they say clinically proven, but what does that even mean? Like, who gets to decide that? Who gets to say, slap that label on a product? And and similarly on social media, there's just a lot that's not good information, but at the same time, simply telling doctors or other health professionals to use social media is also not enough, because there's just so many platforms now. They're so complicated to use that I fortunately have sort of been familiar with a lot of them, have seen a lot of them evolve, and have been relatively successful on some of these platforms to be able to teach others to do that. And that's been part of my goal in this chief medical social media officer position that I have in my health system, is to, motivate and inspire and kind of empower other health professionals to get online. But also outside of my institution, I founded a professional society, the Association for Healthcare Social Media, to help other health professionals do the same thing. And we partner with the social media platforms, YouTube and LinkedIn, and many of them have become very interested in helping us and helping health professionals around the world to do this because of everything that's happened over the past 2 years. And so they've put on some of the courses and information sessions that they've put on for us have been really um, enlightening, because they talk about not only like how to upload a video, basics like that, but also, okay, if you're gonna have a YouTube video that you want to put out there, like this is what your home studio setup should be like. You need to pay attention to lighting, and you need to pay attention to sound, and how do you tell your story to make it more, watchable, basically. And
Dr. Austin, I think you just volunteered yourself for doing a collaboration with Curito here to host a social media workshop, not only for medical professionals, but anybody basically
I
who wants to do it.
definitely, yeah, there's a lot that goes into, I think, behind the scenes that I think, um, a lot of it, I would say, when people have big followings or have been able to really harness, a community on there, it's often like calculated. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think that it's just, there's a way to go about it that is, being very mindful and thoughtful. And so, it's not as haphazard as it seems.
Lots of good stuff right there that you just shared. But I also want to lure us back into the core, premise of this podcast in
Mhm.
terms of the challenges and impactful moments. So, I mean, we basically covered your whole kind of journey from US to
Yeah.
Taiwan and medical school to this social media role. And it really sounds like, I mean, if no one really knew, it could sound like it was a smooth ride for you. But but it does sound like obviously with moving from the U.S. back to Taiwan and getting that education and becoming a third cultural kid, identity for you that was part of it, right? Like kind of understanding where home is for you and identity. And then now, entering the medical field and finding yourself in this social media officer role. I mean, I also want to ask, are there other chief medical social media officers in other hospitals, or are you like the one and only in the United States? you know?
Yeah, I am actually, and it's
Wow.
yeah.
So honored.
Well, I mean, I think it's a new thing. It's hard to find somebody who is just as well versed in like medicine and like their area of expertise as they are being on multiple platforms and having like, the sort of, experiences I've had in helping others create and, helping our professional societies and stuff. So it's a lot, I think, to expect of somebody, but I'm hoping that there's a lot of social media savvy people out there nowadays, and I shouldn't be the only one out there. Obviously, I think if we're really going to do something impactful over time, every hospital ideally would have someone in my position.
Yeah,
Um,
so Jefferson Health is must be a very forward thinking
yeah,
place too, to have allowed you to say,
yeah,
hey, I think I can do this, and would you be game in giving me this title?
yeah.
So
The CEO here is very forward thinking and innovative, and is kind of known for being that way. And so I don't think it came to anyone's surprise that if there was any place to support something like this, it would be here.
oh,
So I
that's
give him
great.
all the credit for doing that, and he's been a great mentor of mine as well. Um, but yeah, I think that, like you said, this it really does sound like a smooth ride, and I think externally to a lot of people, it looks like a smooth ride, especially because on social media, we tend to focus on positive things and highlights of our career and highlights of our days. And no one talks about, all the tough times where we struggle. And
Will you start posting that now after we finish this
oh
recording?
yeah, no, and I have in the past, I definitely have talked about, some of those low points. But I would absolutely continue doing that because I think it's important for people to see that it's not a smooth ride, and it's actually a perfect platform to share that on because I've been very fortunate to have a lot of supporters online, and when I do talk about something like that, people really come to my side and really uh, offer their time and to talk and just vent, and it's great. It's ultimately, social media shouldn't be like one-sided communication. It's like bilateral, and I think it's also um, yeah, just where it should be a tool to kind of connect, and I'm so glad that there's that, yeah, aspect of it.
Yeah. And I guess I would also just add that when you're viewing things on social media and online, to just keep an open mind and
Hmm.
don't pass judgment,
Yes.
because it already takes a big step for someone to put themselves out there. And there is just way too much information. So if it clicks with you, great. If it doesn't, just leave it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that I've I've had to it's always been a bit of a leap of faith to put myself out there every time, even now after all these years, if there is a new platform that comes about, for me to take that jump to, suddenly adopt a new platform and put myself out there in that way, it's weird. And I have to kind of get used to it. But yeah, if there are people, the internet is a really wild place, and if you are faced with negativity, you're in control of that presence. You don't have to engage with that.
Totally. That's great advice right there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of this is just through experience, and sometimes through learning the hard way. I've been caught in situations where it's been um, sometimes really miserable experiences on social media with trolls or with people, you know, um, wanting to really threaten me for whatever reason, and at a certain point, I have to, and fortunately, I spend most of my time caring about my day job and caring about patients, and so it's easy for me to say, okay, I don't need to deal with that because I have so much else that I need to worry about. But for a lot of other people, especially people who are relying on social media for their businesses and whatnot, um, I can see how that can be even more consuming. So, you know, just disengage if you have to.
Right, right. So it almost sounds like this whole social media and medicine journey for you has also helped shape an identity, right? Because now your identity is Dr. Austin Chang, the Chief Medical Social Media Officer.
Isn't it weird? It's actually, I've thought about this from time to time. Like back when I was in high school, my identity was very different. My identity then was you're the guy who plays violin.
I was gonna say you're the violinist.
Yeah, and I knew that, and then when I went to college, you're suddenly thrown into this much bigger community, and not everyone knows what you do, um, and to a certain extent, it was still that identity that still stuck with me for a while. I still played violin through college and med school, and then when I went to med school, we all kind of found ourselves in the same pool. We all kind of reset, and then we diverged again after that. And it's interesting, when I look back at my med school classmates, who many of whom I've sort of not spoken to for a long time because we all been busy doing our own thing, and some of us have really gone in very different directions, and and yeah, my identity has sort of emerged as this social media, personality. And I think what often people will are surprised to find out is that my real life personality and how I go about my job is not necessarily what people would expect to see based on what they know of me on social media. I think I was just having a conversation with a friend yesterday, and they were also like, I always felt like online people see you as this larger than life thing, and especially in my field, people who've never met me before assume that I'm a certain way. And then if you really see me at work, in my element there, I'm not like that at all. I'm actually very quiet. I like focus on my job, and social media is not a part of my day-to-day conversation. Which is my belief is that's the way it should be, because when I'm taking care of patients, I'm there to do that, and social media is kind of like supplementing this whole medical experience. So yeah, it's interesting. It's good that you brought up taking everything you see on social media with a grain of salt, because it
Yeah.
certainly is not all it seems to be.
Well, I also really like that you shared that just now because I definitely feel like, yeah, people probably, if they've never met you but seen you on social media, they might assume, as we say in Chinese, very feng feng dian dian de, like just
Yeah,
very outgoing and, but that's not all of you,
yeah,
right? Like you can be like that, but that is not all of you. And it's not to say that your real true self, if you wanted to say, the quiet in your scrubs, really focused patient first, can't be reciprocated on your social media platform either,
yeah.
right? But it's not like you're gonna come in and talk to your clients like you're doing a TikTok video, right?
Yeah, and it's the interesting thing is like when I started out, especially with TikTok, because it's video based and it's a lot of humor and stuff like that. When I started out, some of my colleagues who were already familiar with seeing me on social media were questioning, is this appropriate? Is this right? And even my parents, were thinking like, are you sure? Is this going to compromise your reputation? And I had, just like all the other experiences I've had on social media, because I've been doing this for a while, I've thought, no, 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 you guys don't see the value in this yet. Just wait. And sure enough, suddenly there were a bunch of doctors and health professionals getting on TikTok doing similar things, and it's brought about like not only just a lot of cool opportunities, but just being able to reach a much wider audience than we originally, have been able to do, and put out really important information, especially in a time where suddenly all eyes are on health, and so yeah, I think that it's been we all recognize now that okay, it's not just TikTok, especially, it's not just a dancing platform. It's not just like jokes and humor. There's a lot of like, good conversations happening on there that are like informative and, full of education. So, yeah, hopefully I'll be able to still keep up with it, and whatever the next platform is that comes around, I'll be able to adapt to that. And that's just sort of how it's been for me. It's just adapting to the next thing, and
Yeah.
and keeping an open mind. You know.
And I think that's great that you brought that up because it also, like you said earlier on in this conversation, is that platforms like TikTok and social media is allowing medicine and medical professionals be more relatable, right? It's like, I guess it's kind of like talking about lawyers too, right? Or sorry, I'm not trying to stereotype here, but just
Yeah,
certain fields, people have a certain stigma or stereotype about
yeah,
individuals who work in that field. But it's like you said earlier, you guys we're all humans. There are funny doctors, there are serious doctors, and you can bring that element online to
yeah.
be more relatable and to make it fun. Medicine doesn't have to be so serious. It doesn't have to be so scary.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some very successful and gotten to know some very successful people on TikTok and social media in general who are lawyers and scientists, and areas that, other, before social media probably didn't were seen in a certain light, and now it's a whole different lens that we can see it through, and it's great. And kind of what we to go back to what we were talking about even earlier, when it comes to certain groups who are talking about their disabilities, or talking about other struggles that they have, or if they fall into certain um, groups like, yeah, the LGBTQ community, they can all talk about their identities, their communities, like, what they're facing, and be able to reach a huge audience on social media. And, mental health, everything that we've spoken about, it's just another way to highlight it and raise awareness, And I've learned so much just being on social media myself. Some of the content that I've put out there, people have given me feedback that I otherwise, as a health professional, wouldn't have even known about, or I didn't know that this was, the way I was talking about something could potentially be, misconstrued or offensive, and it's really impacted how I go about communicating health messages, both on social media and in real life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very helpful. Give us some social media tips and tools that you like to use. We talked earlier about how when we're viewing on social media, we should think twice in terms of what we're absorbing. But
Mhm.
also, I think we should also understand, it is an industry, right? Like this whole online platform is an industry, and it is a lot of work to be able to put that 30-second reel up there. So walk us through it. Which platforms are your favorite to use, for scheduling your post or editing your videos? Or, how many browsers do you have to have on your computer before you can actually press send for, or submit to have that one video or one post go up?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I mean,
Analytics, everything.
oh my, there's a lot that goes into it. I'll say that I really don't have any external help. There's a lot of good people out there that you can outsource certain things to, whether it's editing or social media management. I do everything on my own for all of my platforms. I actually don't use any very fancy tools. Most of the stuff that I do, like on TikTok, are only using the in-app features. Um, and I edit certain things maybe even on my phone, just like iMovie. I mean, YouTube I'll use like Final Cut Pro, but I don't make as many long form YouTube videos just because of time, and everything else that I'm doing already. But I think, like, one thing about social media I'll point out is, again, it kind of you have to put yourself in the shoes of your viewer, and what's going to keep the viewer interested or pique their interest to begin with. So even when I think about like a TikTok or a reel, I think about, okay, how do I capture someone's attention in the first few seconds? But then how do I maintain their attention so that they can watch the whole video through? Because ultimately, we need to help the social media platforms determine whether or not this is something people care about. And when people watch a whole video through, um, or watch it again, that tells Instagram or TikTok or YouTube that this is interesting, and they'll keep on propagating that to other people.
Right.
So that's how things go viral, you know. And if people only watch the first second or two of your video and then move on to something else, that tells the platform that it's not interesting. And ultimately, the platforms are built this way for business purposes, right? It's like algorithmic so that it can kind of predict what the user wants to see, and they'll try to, you know, that's why TikTok is so successful. Is I think that they're very good at predicting what you want to see, so you stay on their app for hours on end. But ultimately, yeah, it's and so when I talk about something health related, I do have to think about, okay, is this going to keep someone's interest throughout an entire 15 seconds or 30 seconds even? So sometimes I have to edit it so that it's, you know, even if I lose interest halfway through, like I know that no one else is going to be interested in it. So I have to think of it in that way, like from the viewer's perspective. And the reason why I think I've been a little more you know, thoughtful about how I do this is because I have to put an extra layer of thought into what patients feel, you know, and how the content that I'm putting out there isn't offensive to patients and it's not going to somehow affect, again, trust in our profession. And just because something's funny or like, you know, it doesn't mean that it's okay to put out there. And we have that sort of responsibility from our end, you know, as medical professionals to uphold that.
So when you have something like that happen, do you just step up and apologize and, again, like correct that information? You know, when you
Yeah,
have, I guess, like a PR mistake that they call it, right? You have like
yeah.
a boo boo. What do you do when that happens?
I mean, it really depends on the situation, how far some things have reached, and kind of what exactly the situation is. I fortunately have never fallen into a situation like that that's quite, you know, that egregious. Um, but you know, whether it's apologizing and being very transparent about a situation, I think that's often a good way to handle it. But sometimes it's just a matter of like taking the content down and, you know, not fueling the flames. Um, you know, there can be, even in the best intentioned videos, if something is misinterpreted and you get into this, you know, inflammatory conversation with people in the comments section that's never ending, you know, it can sometimes be not only inappropriate but also dangerous to us, because the culture these days is really, you know, cancel culture affects us all. And
Right, right.
you know, people have had their employers contacted and had other situations like that, or been had their personal safety threatened, and
Yeah.
and so we've had to, you know, yeah, deal with that.
Thanks for that insight. I think it is a good reminder that one needs to be mindful when it comes to posting content on social media, especially if you are building trust and offering information out there to others. There is, I suppose, a certain level of etiquette to uphold these days, isn't it? Now, as an influencer, I do have to ask you if you can remember that moment you found out you hit 1 million followers, or, one particular post you put out there that went completely viral and got picked up by different outlets. How does that make you feel?
There wasn't a particular moment for a lot of my, you know, social media journey. I mean, I will say that on TikTok, there were several videos early on that, you know, had over 1 million views, and I was like, wow, that's a lot. I think, but you know, TikTok, I think the way the platform is like, you know, a lot of my audience there are not necessarily my colleagues. Whereas like on Instagram and Twitter, most of the people who I think follow me are in the medical field or somehow associated with healthcare. And so anything that I put out there sometimes will propagate through the health community and get back to me. And I think more recently, one of my colleagues said that I had written something about them, and suddenly they were inundated with messages. Their family members contacted them, and that's sort of, I hear that secondhand. Like I don't get that feedback like kind of firsthand. And so to this day, I don't really feel. I often don't feel like, oh, I that you know I'm talking like I have this megaphone that I'm talking to like thousands or people at a time. I don't feel that way. And if people see something and are inspired by it, that's awesome. But I often don't get like positive feedback.
Yeah.
So I think yeah, it's never been like quite that moment. There have been milestones along the way that I think have been gratifying, where like, oh yeah, I reached a certain number of followers. But I'll tell you that after a certain time, now that I've been doing this for a while, these numbers don't matter to me anymore because I feel that what I'm striving for isn't fame, and fame to me is not. It's momentary. Even the most famous, and the reason why I think that way is because even the most famous people out there, we don't talk about them 24/7, and oftentimes if they're inactive after a while, we stop talking about them. And so especially in healthcare, there's even less people who are truly famous, the way we think of that term.
Right.
And
I think you beautifully summarized that.
yeah, like
Right, because your whole core is sending positive messaging, awareness, educating. It's not labeling you as an influencer because you have this many followers,
yeah.
right? And so that is the core value of what you're trying to present here. So I did have another question, which was about detoxing. So, right, do you do that? Do you detox? Someone who is a social media officer.
Like detox from social media, or like
Yeah, detox from social media, detox from your gadgets,
okay,
right? So
I
you're
was
not
gonna
looking
say
at other people's social media. You're not thinking about your next post. You're not creating content for your next
oh
post. You're just on a social media detox. I mean, that is a thing, right? We know that's a thing.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, if you're talking about health detoxes, I have opinions about how there isn't very much evidence behind that. But I'll say, like, for social media detoxes and disconnecting, I will admit that I struggle with that a lot, actually. If I'm not communicating online on one of the platforms, for a day or two, I feel like, oh no, people are forgetting about me, or I'm not doing my job, or I'm not, being active, and sometimes it's a struggle. And honestly, for certain platforms, I've been able to peel myself away easier than others. TikTok, throughout 2020, I was making like maybe two TikToks a day. And if I ever missed a day, I just felt like, oh no, like that was bad for I don't even know why. And I repeatedly was told by TikTok, by my sort of like liaisons there, not to worry about that. But for some reason, I felt that sort of pressure. And more recently this year, I've taken longer stretches of days away from the platform. I mean, the last time I posted on TikTok was 3 days ago, I think. And to some people that's still like very often, but yeah, I think it is hard to really disengage, and I do feel better after I have. So I encourage people to do so, and to keep in mind that, again, it's a highlight reel. You're often seeing a very skewed version of people's lives on social media, and yeah, that you know, um, you know, take
I
everything.
will remind I will remind you as well to detox from
Yeah,
social media.
please do, because it's good. It's good to disconnect, and then you feel like re-energized. And then I personally am of the belief that I only go online to talk about something if I really feel like I have something to talk about, not just for the sake of putting something out there.
You have a lot to talk about and a lot to share then.
I sometimes I feel like I do, but there are moments where I feel like, wow, I really don't have much to talk about, but I don't want to force a message just for the sake of it, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, I will provide all the links in our comments below so people can follow you on your TikTok, your YouTube, and your Instagram page, as well as your Twitter and the medical professional social media platform that you mentioned earlier. I think that's great for anyone who's in the medical field who is curious about entering this realm and industry of social media. Thank you so much for sharing and for your time. I know you had a medical emergency earlier, so we actually delayed recording this about an hour.
Yeah, I know. But thank you so much for having me. I mean, I really jumped at the opportunity to reconnect with you, and I'm so glad that you have this awesome platform that you're developing because I think it's great to bring people together and share experiences and learn from each other. And yeah, I really loved having this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Well, thank you, Dr. Austin Chang.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.